There is a code hidden in ancient texts that have crossed millennia, and the question is no longer whether it exists, but why it seems to be revealing itself right now, at the most unstable moment in modern history, when technology, power, and belief are colliding in ways we have never seen before. What if everything we are experiencing is not random, but part of a pattern that was already described, fragmented, and preserved within writings that many consider purely spiritual, but that may actually contain signals, warnings, and even sequences waiting to be interpreted at the right time? For centuries, sacred texts have been treated as symbols of faith, moral stories, and spiritual records, but there is a layer that has always been ignored by most, a layer that does not speak only about the past or morality, but about cycles, repetitions, and a possible code that connects seemingly distant events into a single narrative line. In the book of Daniel, for example, we find descriptions of empires rising and falling, represented by statues and beasts, images that seem symbolic, but when examined closely, reveal highly specific patterns about power, control, and collapse, patterns that echo in a disturbing way within today's political and economic systems. In the book of Revelation, written by John, the language becomes even more intense, with visions of marks, numbers, surveillance, and global control, elements that for centuries were interpreted as distant metaphors, but that now begin to resemble descriptions that are strikingly close to the reality being built around us. But here is the point few people realize. These texts were not written as a direct timeline. They were structured like symbolic codes, fragmented into images, numbers, and repetitions that only make sense when viewed together, like pieces of a puzzle that can only be assembled when humanity reaches a certain stage. And what if that stage is now? We live in an era where data is collected in real time, where digital identities are becoming mandatory, where physical money is being replaced by controlled digital systems, and where the capacity for monitoring surpasses anything ancient civilizations could have imagined, or did they? Because when we look at descriptions of a system where no one can buy or sell without a specific identification, we are no longer talking about a distant idea, we are talking about something technically possible, functional, and in many places, already being implemented. But the code is not only in the descriptions, it is in the patterns. Empires that grow too fast collapse under their own weight and are replaced by even more centralized systems. Leaders who emerge in times of crisis promising order and end up concentrating power beyond what any society can sustain. And a population that, in the face of fear, accepts control in exchange for security. This cycle has not happened once, nor twice. It repeats throughout history, with slight variations, as if it were following an invisible script, a structure that has already been recorded, but never fully understood. And this is where the concept of the last code begins to make sense. Because perhaps these texts are not merely describing events, but revealing a final pattern, a convergence where all previous cycles align into a single point, a moment where the system reaches its peak of control, and at the same time, its greatest fragility. A global, interconnected system, efficient, and extremely vulnerable. Vulnerable not only to technical failures, but to the human factor itself. Distrust. The collapse of trust is always the beginning of the end of any great structure. And that is also there, hidden between the lines, in the idea of division, of conflict, of internal collapse. Now think carefully. We have never had so much information, and never so much confusion. We've never had so much access, and never so much dependency. We've never been so connected, and at the same time, so fragmented. Does this look like evolution or preparation? Because when you observe all of this through the lens of those ancient texts, an uncomfortable feeling begins to emerge, as if we are following a script we did not write, but are executing with precision. And perhaps the most unsettling part is not what has already happened, but what is still to come. Because the pattern always points to a moment of decision, a point where it is no longer about systems or governments, but about individual choices, to accept or to question, to follow or to resist, to ignore or to see. And that choice is never presented clearly. It comes disguised as convenience, as progress, as necessity. That is how every great turning point in history happens. Silently, until it is too late to turn back. So the final question is not whether these codes exist, The question is, are you recognizing the signs while they can still be understood? Or will you only realize when everything has already been decoded and executed? Because if there is one last message hidden in these texts, it is not about the end of the world. It is about the moment the world changes and almost no one notices. This is not just a record, it is a signal. And perhaps the last one is still being transmitted right now,